Well, I'm not in New Jersey anymore. I'm here in Venice, Italy, my favorite town, my favorite city in Europe. I mean, what's not to like? The food's incredible, the people are great, but the really coolest thing about this place is it is centuries of years old. I mean, over 800 years ago, Marco Polo stood probably right here, looking out at the Adriatic, not knowing that 20 years later, he would bring back history of the Orient and the Far East that would change the course of history in the world. But that's for another story. Today, we'll just have fun, and in a couple of days, we'll be biking through the valleys of the amazing Dolomites in northern Italy. So, come along on this journey with me. Make sure to like and subscribe below, and leave me a comment. I love to hear from you. Let's do this. So, as you can see, we began our adventure in Venice, one of the most amazing and unique cities in the world. We were only spending a few days here before heading up north to meet with our backroads biking group in the Dolomites. But I knew I wanted to make the most of every moment. You see, to me, Venice is one of the most photogenic cities on the earth. Every alleyway, canal, and reflection tells a story. And that's why I've decided to break this video up into two parts, to give this magical place the time and attention it truly deserves. But before we dive into the visual poetry of the streets and the lagoons, I think it's important to understand the soul of the city. Venice has a history unlike any other. Rising from a lagoon in the 5th century, it was built quite literally on water, its foundations resting on millions of wooden pilings. By the Middle Ages, it had become a powerful maritime republic, a hub for trade between East and West, and a melting pot of culture, art, and architecture. And you can feel that layered history everywhere you look here. From the Gothic spires of the Doge Palace to the Byzantine domes of St. Mark's Basilica, the architecture here is a visual diary of centuries past. Light dances off weathered stone, off pastel walls reflected in green water, perfect for any photographer chasing beauty and mood. But Venice is more than stone and water. It's a living city made vibrant by its people. The quiet pride of the gondoliers, the warm smiles from bakers and artisans, the voices of locals echoing in narrow alleyways where the laundry sways in the breeze. And then there's the food. Ah, the food. Simple, fresh, and deeply rooted in the lagoon. Think cicchetti, the Venetian-style tapas shared with a glass of Prosecco at a tiny baccaro, or a seafood risotto rich with flavor and tradition, or the freshest fish you've ever tasted. Top that off with a taste of grappa, and you'll be dreaming of coming back every time. For a photographer, Venice is a dream, but it's not just about what you see, it's what you feel. The interplay of history and the present. The silence of the canals before sunrise, the way light and water tell a story. You can't quite put into words, but you can try to capture it with your lens. Now, this wasn't my first time in Venice, and I knew exactly where I wanted to stay this time. My favorite hotel in the city, the legendary Hotel Danielli. More than just a place to sleep, the Danielli is a destination in itself. Located just steps from St. Mark's Square and the Doge Palace, it sits right on the edge of the Grand Lagoon, offering some of the most breathtaking views in all of Venice. But what makes this hotel truly special is, well, its history. The Hotel Danielli was originally the 14th century Palazzo Dandolo, home to one of Venice's most powerful noble families. In the 1820s, it was transformed into a luxury hotel and quickly became a place to stay for aristocrats, artists, and travelers on the grand tour. Over the centuries, it's welcomed guests like Charles Dickens, Goethe, and Hemingway. And you feel that history the moment you step inside. The soaring Gothic atrium with its marble columns and sweeping staircase is like walking into a Venetian time capsule. Light filters down from the stained glass windows, dancing across carved wood balconies and velvet drapes. Flowers everywhere, fresh as can be. It's elegance, yes, but it's also atmosphere. A place where you can hear echoes of the past while sipping espresso and watching the lagoon shimmer just beyond the terrace. As a photographer, staying here at the Danielli is a dream. You're literally immersed in history, surrounded by some of the city's best light and architecture. Every window is a frame. Every hallway tells a story. The last time we were here, I captured some of my all-time favorite shots right from the balcony of my room at the Danielli. I remember vividly a dramatic summer storm rolling in across the lagoon, transforming the city into something straight out of a painting. The sky darkened, the wind picked up, and then that lightning. With my shutter speed set high, I just kept clicking frame after frame after frame, trying to anticipate the next flash. And then it happened. I caught the most incredible lightning strike right over the dome of Santa Maria della Salute, the beautiful Baroque cathedral that stands like a guardian at the entrance to the Grand Canal. It was one of those rare moments where nature and architecture collide in a single frame. The curve of the dome, the shimmer of rain on the water, and the jagged bolt lighting up the sky. It felt like, well, Venice had revealed one of her secrets, just for a split second. That image still gives me chills. Now, since we're on the topic, let's talk a little bit about how to capture lightning in a city like Venice. It's not only thrilling, but it can produce some of the most unforgettable images. But first, a quick word on safety, because it's easy to get caught up in the excitement. Lightning is no joke. Always shoot from a sheltered location. In my case, I was on a covered balcony, high enough to get the view, but protected from the elements. Never stand out in the open or near metal railings. Your safety always comes first. Always. To freeze a bolt of lightning, well, you need to keep your shutter speed high, usually around 1/250th to a 1 to 1,000th of a second. So you're trying to catch a quick flash in daylight. But the key is anticipation and patience. If it's darker out or you're shooting at night, you can also use a tripod in long exposure, maybe 5 to 30 seconds. With the camera stable, you just keep the shutter open and hope the lightning strikes while it's recording. It's kind of like fishing, but with a camera and a sky full of electricity. A good rule of thumb, use a wide-angle lens to maximize your coverage of the sky. Set your camera to manual focus so it doesn't hunt in the dark, and keep your ISO low to reduce noise unless it's very dark out. And finally, set your camera on continuous shooting mode or use a remote trigger if you're going to use a long exposure. Remember, it's not just the lightning itself. Try to compose with context. That day, I framed the Santa Maria della Salute dome and let the storm be the drama. The result? A timeless picture against a furious sky. That's the magic. The next morning, I woke just before sunrise, early enough to beat the crowds, with one goal in mind: to capture the quiet motion of the empty gondolas, gently rocking in the morning light, with the bell tower of San Giorgio Maggiore rising across the water just opposite the hotel. Yeah, I know, this is one of the most photographed Instagram scenes in Venice. A postcard moment, an image captured by thousands of photographers and painted by literally hundreds of artists across the centuries. But I wanted to give it a go. Not to copy, but to experience it for myself, to see what it felt like to stand there, camera in hand, witnessing that iconic stillness. The gondolas tied to their wooden posts, swaying rhythmically with the tide. The soft light of dawn reflecting off the water, turning the lagoon into a palette of colors. And in the distance, the beautiful San Giorgio's bell tower rising like a beacon. I set my shutter speed slow enough to blur the motion of the gondolas just slightly, just enough to evoke that dreamlike feeling as if the entire city is floating between reality and memory. And standing there all alone in that silence, it didn't matter how many times this scene had been captured before. For that moment, it was mine. Now let's talk a little bit about how I approach photographing that moment. This is where the magic of shutter speed really comes into play. To capture motion, not just freeze it, you have to let time flow through the frame. I took multiple shots at different slow shutter speeds between 1 and 30 seconds depending on how much blur I wanted. Just long enough to capture the rhythm of the water and the gentle rocking of the boats while still keeping the distant architecture sharp and in focus. To make that work in early daylight, I needed a neutral density filter, basically sunglasses for your lens. It cuts the light so you can slow your shutter speed without overexposing the shot. Of course, in this case, a tripod is essential. Any camera movement during a long exposure will, it'll ruin the shot. And if you want a tack sharp result, well, you have to use a remote shutter release or a 2-second timer to avoid any shake when you press that button. I focused about a third into the scene to maintain sharpness from foreground to background, keeping those gondola mooring posts crisp, while the boats themselves blurred into gentle ghost-like shapes. This technique is one of my favorites because it turns a very familiar subject into something more impressionistic. It's not just a document or a photograph, it's a feeling. With the light growing warmer and the first ferry starting to stir the water, I packed up and I began to wander deeper into the heart of Venice. Through the silent alleyways and across still shadowed bridges, the only ones out at that time of morning were the shopkeepers opening up their stores and photographers capturing beautiful brides in their flowing gowns in front of century-old architecture. I let myself get lost in the walking and the waking rhythm of the city, camera in hand, no plan needed. This is my favorite kind of photography. The kind where you chase light and listen for moments, not just hunt for landmarks. And in Venice, those moments are everywhere. As the sun began to rise higher, I left the waterfront and slipped into the city's maze of alleyways, those narrow, twisting corridors that make Venice feel like a living labyrinth. This is where the real magic happens, away from the crowds, where laundry hangs like prayer flags between the windows, and the only sounds are footsteps on the stone, and the occasional splash of canal water echoing off the old walls. In places like these, photography becomes more instinctual, more about feeling than planning. One of the most powerful tools in a setting like this is composition. In a city of endless texture and layers, knowing where to place your subject or how to let the environment shape your frame makes, well, all the difference in the world. I'm always looking for leading lines, narrow alleyways that pull your eye toward a distant doorway or a canal that curves just enough to create mystery beyond the bend. Light and shadow are constant dance partners here. The high buildings create dramatic shafts of light that slice through the darkness, perfect for silhouette shots or high contrast compositions. And if you catch a figure walking through that light, well, pause, because that's a moment worth waiting for. Framing is everywhere in Venice. Arches, windows, doorways, between the leaning buildings. I often stop and shoot through iron gates or over bridges, placing part of the foreground intentionally out of focus to create depth and mystery. And then there are the reflections. Venice is a city painted on water. Every bridge, every wall, every flicker of sun bounces off the canals like a liquid mirror. Sometimes the reflection tells a more interesting story than the building itself. And as I wandered deeper, camera in hand, it hit me again. Venice doesn't just reward you for seeing, it rewards you for noticing. Because in this city, even the quiet corners have stories to tell. As the day progressed, I didn't let harsh light of the midday sun daunt me. Instead of retreating indoors, I leaned into it, turning my attention to the architecture of the streets, the rhythm of the crowds, and the flurry of birds gliding across St. Mark's Square to and fro. Midday light may not be soft or golden, but it can be powerful. It brings out sharp shadows, textures, and the play of contrast between light and dark, perfect for bold graphic compositions. Armed with my Nikon ZF, I relied on a custom preset button I had dialed in for just this kind of moment. With one click, I could switch from my narrow pinpoint focus setup, ideal for architectural detail and landscapes, over to a fast shutter with a wide focus mode for capturing motion, which was especially helpful when the birds launched into flight or children darted across the square in spontaneous joy. I move with the scene, sometimes slowly, watching for patterns in light and behavior, other times quickly, reacting to sudden movement or bursts of energy. And yeah, I may have looked like a crazy man, zigzagging between marble columns, crouching low, turning skyward, twisting for just the right reflection, but there was a method to my madness. I was chasing light, angles, and motion. I was trying to capture the spirit of a city that has been photographed, well, a million times, yet still finds ways to surprise. There's something about shooting in St. Mark's Square that makes you feel like you're, well, stepping into a painting. The geometry of the Doge Palace, the long colonnades of the Procuraty, the wings of the pigeons catching the sunlight midair. And my goal was simple. I wanted to create images that felt timeless, that could just as easily have been taken hundreds of years ago as they are today. Because in Venice, well, that's the magic. Everything changes, yet nothing really does. So let's take a quick moment to talk about shooting in this harsh midday light, because, you know, there's something that often intimidates photographers, but it really doesn't have to. Yes, the light is strong, the shadows are deep, but rather than fight it, you should work with it. There are a few tips I use on the streets of Venice or any city when the sun is high overhead. First, look for contrast. Use shadows to your advantage. Doorways, arches, and colonnades, all, well, they create sharp divides of light and dark, perfect for dramatic compositions. Expose for the highlights. I often shoot slightly underexposed in midday sun to preserve the detail in the brightest parts of the scene. This is really especially important in a city like Venice, where light bounces off stone and water. Shoot black and white. Harsh light is fantastic for monochrome. It amplifies texture, architecture, and strong geometric shapes. And find reflected light. Don't just shoot in the light, shoot what the light is hitting. You'll often find beautiful bounce light coming off the canals or pale buildings that soften subjects tucked in the shade. Before the evening lights and cafe music, there was one more experience I couldn't leave Venice without: a ride in a gondola. But first, we did what my wife and I always love to do, and something I recommend for anyone visiting this city. Just walk, without a map, without a plan. Get lost in the alleyways. It's in those moments of aimless wandering that Venice really reveals herself. Quiet courtyards, ivy-draped balconies, hidden shrines tucked into walls, and the kind of golden light you only find reflected off ancient stone and water. As we turned one shaded corner, we met a gondolier standing beside his elegant hand-carved boat, gently rocking in the canal. It felt like fate. We climbed in, and just like that, we were gliding. There's a reason they call it the best way to experience Venice. From the water, everything feels different. The bridges arch more gracefully, the buildings lean more poetically, and the sounds of the city soften, replaced by the quiet rhythm of the oar against the water. I had my Nikon in hand, paired with a 40mm prime, my favorite for moments like this. Wide enough to capture the scene, intimate enough to cover and feel the details. As we floated past centuries-old windows and tucked-away courtyards, our gondolier shared stories of his 5 generations of gondoliers, of the traditions passed down, of how every boat is custom-made for the gondolier's exact height and rowing style. And then he sang, a soft serenade in the Venetian dialect, echoing off the walls of the canal as we slipped under bridges and past quiet homes. I captured stills and video, reflections, textures, expressions, and glances, trying to hold on to a few moments from a ride that felt like, well, stepping into a dream. As the sun dipped low, the light softened, and Venice transformed once again. This is my favorite time of day, blue hour. That short window after sunset when the sky turns cobalt and the buildings glow from within. The crowds thin and the noise fades, and the city reveals a quieter, more intimate version of itself. I returned to St. Mark's Square, this time with tripod in hand and a slower rhythm. Here's where Venice becomes geometry and reflection. The long arcades of the Procurity, the repeating arches, the delicate carvings, all glowing in soft light, mirrored by the wet stone or shallow puddles left by the tides. I framed long exposures of the lamplit colonnade, carefully composing to highlight the lines and symmetry that give the square its majestic sense of order. And then I wandered back towards the canals. You see, at night the water becomes ink. Lights ripple on the surface like brushstrokes. Gondolas become silhouettes, and the bridges, now empty, curve quietly into the dark. Perfect subjects for moody, minimalistic compositions. In these moments, it's less about the shot and more about the stillness. I let the shutter drag sometimes 10 to 20 seconds to capture the mood, not just the place. Reflections stretch, shadows fall deeper, and Venice, once again, feels eternal. On our last night in Venice, before heading up to Bolzano for our much-anticipated biking adventure, my wife and I did what has become, well, our favorite thing in the city. We found a table in one of the open-air cafes in St. Mark's Square. We ordered a pair of cappuccinos and simply soaked in the moment. As the sun disappeared behind the domes and the last light faded from the sky, the square came alive in a different way. The soft glow of cafe lights, the gentle clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, and the music. Oh, the music. One of the most charming traditions in Venice is the way the 5 grand cafes surrounding the square each have their own classical ensembles. Small bands of violins, clarinets, pianos, and accordions that take turns serenading the crowd. They never play the same time. Instead, one band finishes and another picks up, echoing across the stone piazza like a perfectly timed conversation. The music, the setting, the sound of laughter rising into the stars, well, it was and always is sheer magic. We shared a gelato, leaned back in our chairs, and let ourselves be part of the scene, just 2 more people in love with this remarkable city. Interrupted only by the tolling of the bell tower above us, reminding us that even in a place where time seems to stand still, it still marches on. It was the perfect goodbye. I hope you've enjoyed this visual tribute to one of my favorite cities in the world, Venice. But this journey isn't over yet. In part 2, we trade gondolas for bikes and head deep into the heart of the Alps. where the mountains of northern Italy and Austria rise like cathedrals, and the landscapes look like something pulled straight from The Sound of Music. We'll ride through northern Tyrolia and the Dolomites, where the hills are truly alive, and the weight of the world seems to melt away, if only for a moment. It's a chapter filled with open roads, quiet trails, soaring peaks, and scenes that remind us why beauty matters. So if you haven't already liked and subscribed and ring the bell, please do so you don't miss the next part of this adventure. And please, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your own experiences, or even your photography questions. Let's learn and grow together frame by frame. And don't forget to keep chasing the light. Until next time.